So, of course, I'm still working at General Atomic. So I go back to school, and at that time there's a psychology school that specializes in working adults, so I'm able to go nights and weekends. I go back to school, and my intention is just get the master's, have the degree that allows me to go to corporations and get some money. And by this time, however, we've now managed to raise enough money. They'd have a first and a last and turn on utilities, and, we rent a little house in Logan Heights. And I said in those days, I'm going to write a book. And then the phone rang. Because in this impossible situation, we have about $25 a week to pay somebody. It's like a pittance. We have this unfurnished house in Logan Heights. And where are we going to find this pearl among women who would like to spend 7 days a week, 24 hours a day as a counselor in a battered women's shelter? When the phone rang. And part of our fundraising at that time, we had, telephone solicitation. And this woman, an old warhorse from Kansas City, an old alcoholic with a long history of terrible abuse, who finally made a break for it. Lived at a shelter as a resident for a year in Kansas City. Then as a counselor, came out here to join her friend. And her friend knew she wanted to be a counselor at a battered women's shelter, and when she got that telephone solicitation call, she said, "Oh, I have a friend who wants a job there as a counselor. Who does she call? What's the phone number?" And she called me. I said, "Meet me, you're hired." Anyway, and when she turned up, wow, this woman, she was absolutely perfect. Like I say, she was an old warhorse. She had been through it, and she was a Scorpio, so you couldn't put anything over on it either. So at any rate, so we had our counselor, and that first week she was sleeping on a garden recliner. As furniture started to come in, everybody was donating stuff, refrigerator, tables, blah, blah, sofas, this and that. At any rate, so we had the shelter. I was going to school. I was working at General Atomic. But by this time, thank God, I started working for a team of Japanese physicists. And they were it was great because it was very flexible type of work. And so I was going to school at night. Then I would go over to the shelter. Then I would, I don't know how I was doing all of this, but I was. Then I would go to work the next day. I was younger and had more energy. And so I finally, but on my way, I was almost done with the master's when somebody said to me, "Well, why are you stopping at the master's? Why don't you go all the way through to the PhD?" And I thought, I know a message when I hear one. So I did. And everything fell into place. All my, the people I got, to supervise, it was just, everything fell into place.
Is the shelter still in existence?
No. So after 3.5 years, I just couldn't do it all anymore. And the fundraising, because as opposed to other kinds of charities, you can always cancel the charity, but not when you're feeding people. Mm-hmm. You have to have that food every single day. You need money for toilet paper every single day. Mm-hmm. If something goes, you got to keep those lights on and the heat and this and that. So it was just too much, and I said, we've got to liquidate, we just can't do it. So in Escondido, there was a big old line social service agency that were very cooperative with us, and they really liked our program. So we liquidated everything, gave them the money. They leased a couple of apartments to serve as long-term shelter for their short-term shelter. Right. So that's what happened to that.
And you opened up your own business as a psychologist?
Right. So then by that time, that transition, I was done except for the dissertation. But I had done my horoscope, so I knew this is the year I have to finish the dissertation, because next year I have to take that exam, the licensing exam. That's the year I have to take it. If I have any chance of passing, it's next fall. So I had to zoom through. Everybody saying, "Why are you going so fast? Why don't you take it easy?" No, I had to do that. So I was still working at GA, of course. And then when I got my dissertation done, then I had to get the, not apprenticeship, internship, at some hospital or something like that. But I sort of eased into it because those kind of internships, the internships start in the fall. I had no idea that it was that so many people would be applying. I don't know. I just had absolutely no idea. And because the internships start in the fall, last a year. So I had a part-time job. I was looking for internships. And fortunately, I found one. And got through my internship, got all my hours, all my everythings and whatnots. But simultaneously, it's like people were popping up out of I was still doing the horoscopes. So people were coming for their horoscopes.
Right.
Which mostly centered around relationships. And so that was, even though I was working part-time, I had the horoscope, that made up for it. And then when I started the internship, they were supposed to have 3 interns, but they only ended up hiring 2. And my co-intern, I never would have thought of this, said, well, since you haven't got a third, how about splitting his salary between the 2 of us? So that helped a lot. And I was still doing my horoscopes. And so then I finished my internship, and I passed my exams, and on December 22nd, 1988, I couldn't stand it because, nobody is as sadistic as psychologists. I mean, they really know how to get you. So you take the written exam in end of August or September, then you wait. You take the oral exam in November, but you cannot take the oral exam unless you have passed the written exam. However, even though it's computer graded, I mean, they could tell you that day or certainly a few days later, they don't tell you whether you passed the written exam or not until just before you take the oral exam.
Jeez.
So you have to study for it, even if you don't know if you passed it or not.
Wow.
So, fortunately I did. And I took the oral exam. And then they make out, as soon as you leave the room, the 2 examiners decide whether you passed or not. But again, they don't tell you till 3 months later.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So
I had to wait 6 months to become an RN.
Right.
After I took my exams initially.
Right. So anyway, it was my birthday, and I couldn't wait 3 more months to find out whether I passed. So the Board of Psychology, I mean, it's an impossible thing. I mean, you could be on the phone dialing every 20 seconds, and all you get is a busy signal, or it endlessly rings and nobody answers. But it was my birthday. I was sitting here in the afternoon. I thought, I have got to find out. And I dialed the number, and a very pleasant woman answered the phone. And I said to her, it's my 60th birthday. I have to find out whether I, passed that exam or not. And she said, well, let me see. And she went away, and she came back, and she said, happy birthday, Dr. Getz! Yay! So that's how it all happened. And then, so there I was, and now I had to segue between being an astrologer and being a psychologist. And fortunately, a long time ago in New York, I had worked for this Orchids of Hawaii, which is kind of a sales promotion agency thing. Mm-hmm. So I was used to cold calling, also selling the mutual funds that helped me get through, my library degree. I just sit there on the phone and keep dialing people. And so I decided that I would call up big companies and do stress reduction and stress management, all this stuff. At any rate, it sort of gradually, because now I was licensed, and that was in the days when you could actually bill insurance companies for, So I got a couple of jobs like solar turbines. I did all 3 shifts, stress reduction. So, if anybody there thought, oh, well, this is good, or had some problems, they could call me up and the insurance would pay. So that would be great. So that kind of provided the segue. And there's still some overlap because actually the Getting Back Together book came because somebody came for the astrology part and then said, oh, let's write a book, So at any rate, that's how I didn't have time, but it's like I was dovetailing everything. It was like.
Well, you've been able to combine your psychology with your horoscope too. I mean, that's really quite integral in how
it's essential.
Well, obviously the way you do it works.
Right. It's absolutely essential because it gives me immediately, the insight into people. We don't have to spend months and months and months, plus the intuitive part.
Right.
Where you sort of, right. Anyway, that's my story.
Yeah.